Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 172.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
Gentlemen, it is Code of Honor week.
Robert's favorite.
Robert's favorite, right?
Amen.
Robert is here today, sitting in the captain's chair. We are at Studio M, Nakatomi Plaza, 30th floor, behind the waterfall, just down the hall from Ellis. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Just down the hall from Ellis.
Just down the hall from Ellis.
And don't follow Takagi around after lunch.
Right, he likes the kimchi. So, Code of Honor. This year, the last several months, we have been doing quotes from the philosophers that we've been doing on our heroes, people you should know episode, which is the third week.
Famous faces, faces, whatever.
They still don't have anything better than our heroes, even though they're not always heroes.
It's still an argument.
Yeah.
You can't settle.
Well, nothing just sounds as good as our heroes, but even though that doesn't work. So we're doing quotes from David Hume, philosopher. He's one of the big names that we have to hit.
Yeah.
And, we like to do the quotes because it gives us a peek into the man before we really dive into him next week.
It's the salad before the steak dinner.
It's almost, in many ways, it's the dessert before the steak dinner. To me, because I love this part.
You love the part. Okay.
Because I like to get in and tear the stuff apart.
Yeah, it's the aperitif before you pour that glass of Cabernet. Yeah.
All right. So, as our listeners know, each one of us does a single quote. Martin or Francis goes first, and then the other one, and then I will follow with my my large hammer, and hopefully drive the story home. Oh yes, you have Mjolnir here. Yes,
that's right. He does. That's right.
Yes. So my job is to take their quotes and tie them together with my quote into a coherent whole. Which the guys say I have not failed with that yet. I think I have come close to a little failure, but I managed to at least get in the ballpark.
And
on those
listeners, trust me, Robert is worthy. He can lift.
That's right. He's lift Mjolnir.
Mjolnir. He can lift Mjolnir. He's very worthy. If Jane Foster can lift it,
that's right.
Then definitely Robert can.
So, which one of you guys is going to go first?
He is.
All right.
Okay.
So Martin is going first with his quote. He said in the show prep that I'm going to hate this.
I think neither one of you are going to really like this quote very much. But as soon as I read it, I discarded all others that I was considering.
Excellent.
So, here we go. I'll just go right to it. Celibacy, fasting, penance, mortification, self-denial, humility, silence, solitude, and the whole train of monkish virtues stupefy the understanding and harden the heart, obscure the fancy and sour the temper. A gloomy, harebrained enthusiast after his death may have a place in the calendar, but will scarcely ever be admitted when alive into intimacy and society, except by those who are as delirious and dismal as himself. In other words, have fun. Stop the self-denial, the
Eat,
monkish...
drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die.
Yeah, but he's talking about, you're boring if you do all this stuff.
The ascetic practices.
Well, the thing that caught my ear, I get that too, but the thing that caught my ear was early on in that quote, was basically doing all that stuff. Can I see your quote? Let me say, pull it out here, because you have it right here.
It was long, yeah.
Simplify the understanding and harden the heart, obscure the fancy and sour the temper. I think that is totally opposite of reality. Because I think it is to put it, to use a turn of phrase, the pleasures of the flesh are what obscure those things quite often. Because
self-denial strengthens the
now,
understanding.
And I'm not saying he's taking the extreme. What he's talking about there sounds like one of the desert monks.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, I agree. None of those guys are getting invited to my next party.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't know any desert monks, so that's a pretty easy bet. But what he's missing is that, because obviously he's talking about Christian saints and those.
Yeah, the Catholic saint who ends up on the calendar because of being
Right.
a
That's what
hermit
he's specifically
in a
speaking of,
cave.
but
and-
he means it broader than that.
Yeah.
He would
That's the epitome for him, I would say.
that's from his experience.
Yes.
I mean, there are
But-
the Buddhist monks would fit right into
would
that.
fit into that as well. Yes,
Although he had no experience with them.
Yeah, we don't have. I don't know if they have a day on their own calendar for that or not.
Yeah.
But it's But what I think he's missing is that for us, that self-denial opens up so many other possibilities because it's a very selfish point of view that to partake in those pleasures of the flesh.
It's hedonism.
Hedonism is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And a touch of hedonism here and there, sure, it's all good fun. But when it becomes your way of life, I think you become a slave to it.
I think
Interesting.
yes,
Interesting.
yes.
Now, Francis, you called him a sensualist,
Yes,
as
that's
we
right.
were discussing over lunch, where we all had like 2 hamburgers and an ear of corn.
And a lot of chips.
Yeah, but they were, it was excellent. That's correct.
So
No,
you
they
know,
were small hamburgers.
We're not practicing a lot of self-denial either here, but
No, well, we're not desert monks, thank God.
I think the question of that quotation to me is about the degree that either its statement itself or its antithesis, either one, tends to fall on. It's either you're on one far end and it's all bad, as he says, or you're on that same far end and it's all good, which the antithesis would be. I submit that very little of real life fits into that premise.
Right, well, and even desert monks who spend all day in contemplation do good and worthy things, in my opinion,
sure.
because we obviously all of us we tend to think of ourselves as intellectuals, and for the most part, I'd say we're right. We have our
Absolutely,
goofiness and other pleasures of the flesh that we all enjoy, whether it be bourbon or whatever, but there is something inherently good in contemplating things that are greater than ourselves. And I admit I'm not terribly familiar with Hume's work myself, so I'm going a lot by the quotes that I'm seeing here. And the sense that I get from him is, one, he's atheistic, so that there is no higher power for him, and
correct,
therefore, if there is no higher power, of course that's his point of view, because every atheist has that point of view. Every single one.
Man is the highest good.
Man
Arbiter of good.
and pleasure
That's
is
right.
the highest good. Now, when I say every single one, that's probably inexact. There are probably some that have some selfless bits. But honestly, where do they get that? From the Judeo-Christian or whatever religious upbringing that they have. So, even, they would deny it, but that's where that comes from.
Some would not.
Some would.
I'll
Some
tell
would
you
not.
one that would and I've done a lot of, and I'll make a confession. Whenever I go on retreat, I'll often read the writers, atheistic writers, just to kind of, I suppose it's kind of like a beat myself over the head type of flagellation type of thing. But I really want to understand their argument. I really do, and it strengthens my understanding of the higher power when I understand where they're coming from. Christopher Hitchens is a magnificent writer. He really is. Richard Dawkins, who is often the other, of course, he's still alive. Hitchens passed a few years ago. Dawkins is mean. He's in your face, and
to put it bluntly, Dawkins is an asshole.
I wasn't going to say it, but you're exactly right. Whereas Hitchens is very, very. If you read his book, God Is Not Great, he is usually spot on with his criticisms. And as he says, his only real goal is to be left alone. He doesn't want to be converted, and he doesn't want to convert you. He wants you to believe as you believe, and he wants to be able to believe as he believes. That's kind of not Hume here. Hume is more like and this is kind of the Dawkins assholery, if you will, all intelligent people believe this way.
Right.
And
Well,
that's
I get that
where
approach.
Hume, and that's kind of where this is coming is, only stupid people believe in aesthetic practices like.
And I get that
church,
approach because if you go back in history, atheists or people who thought like him had disdain for religion, even if they might have believed in some higher power. Obviously, I don't think if he does, I'd be shocked, or if did. but they would have been persecuted.
That's correct. He had to be very under the radar.
Well, yeah, but still, the persecution he would have been more like, oh, well, that's going to kill your career, as opposed to burned at the stake. So
Mostly, that's right.
And today, the persecution is non-existent. Most Christians, even the Pope is like, look, you can believe what you're going to believe. Now, granted, Francis wouldn't say this, and I'm sure John Paul and Benedict wouldn't say this, even though they might think it. You believe what you want. You may go to hell for it, but that's your choice. And for the most part, the crazies aside on the Christian side, most Christians, I think, would be willing to say, look, I fervently pray, yes, that you would come to find the truth that we see. But if you don't, I can't force you into that. We've come to, but whereas the atheists, especially like a Dawkins,
yeah,
and those who like to get together and meet and talk about the fact that they don't believe in anything just astounds me. Because really, do you not believe in it? Because all you're doing is talk about what you don't believe in. You kind of got to believe in that to get together and talk about it, don't you?
That's nihilism. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that...
They're still stuck in that, oh my God, we've been persecuted. It's like those who are Wiccans who talk about the burning times when witches were... It's like, first of all, what you think is witchcraft is not what they were talking about.
Right.
And none of you have ever been burned.
It was 300 freaking years ago.
Right. And it wasn't, for the most part, it wasn't even us, meaning the Catholics, that did that. Talk to the Protestants, because I always talk about, I guess, the Catholics who did all of that. No, it wasn't really us.
Yeah.
That was more...
Yes, I picked this one deliberately to kind of push Robert Francis buttons, but in reading about Hume, too, he was not an extremist. He didn't like extremes.
No, yeah, he was very moderate. This doesn't sound moderate, but he really was.
Yeah, I mean, he's the original middle-of-the-road Joe Manchin guy here. And...
Nice one. You really pulled that. Yeah, I liked it.
A little bit of relate to something people are talking about. So I just think this is a very funny way of saying it's okay to enjoy your life. It's okay, which he did.
But he
some
seems
of these
to be
things,
saying, I agree. That's what he's saying. But he also seems to be saying, and if you don't, you're an idiot.
That's right. That's
the part that is problematic.
Yeah, I mean, it's
the religious freedom person in me bristles at that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, yes,
I get that.
Yeah.
But I think he's saying, if that's the way you want to go, just understand that's going to feel like the rest of us, that you're grumpy and obstinate and not going to...
Looked in a mirror lately?
Yeah.
He was Scottish. Remember this.
That's right. Good point. Yes.
Yeah, so Robert's joking about my reputation for grumpiness.
Yeah.
So, but I just love this turn of phrase, a gloomy, harebrained enthusiast will scarcely ever be admitted into intimacy in society. It's just, if you're going to do that, then understand you're not going to be a social butterfly.
Right, but you know what? Again, to me it goes to, I think he's setting up a straw man.
Sure, I get that.
Because,
absolutely.
Yeah.
They
to me, that's what invalidates the argument.
Yeah, because they're not going to be in his circle doesn't mean they're not going to be in somebody else's circle.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. And someone who practices these things isn't necessarily a horrible person to others.
No.
Well, right.
They could very much be a very
he's
kind...
He's simply saying it's idiotic.
But it hardens the heart.
Yeah,
but he's saying it, specifically, these values harden your heart rather than opening your heart to others.
And maybe coming from that Scottish tradition, part of that is formed from the fact that there's going to be a lot of Calvinism in that background.
And that's a very valid deduction on his part.
Yes,
coming from that.
Yeah. Calvinism is very harsh. The more strict Calvinist you are, the harsher your theology. And honestly, I think the more nonsensical. No offense meant to my Calvinist friends, because I do have some. Used to talk theology with one when I was at Lexmark years ago. Matter of fact, a good friend of your brother.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I remember.
And we had a lot of great conversations because we had a differing view on free will.
Yeah, very much so. And that's And if you look at that from a Calvinist lens, well, of course you're going to say
it is the anti-Calvin. Well, yeah, and it's the anti-Calvin.
That's right. That's what he's trying to be.
Yeah.
Which is, and that's the stew that he lives in. That's the atmosphere that he survives
Yeah.
in. So with that particular tint on it, that makes perfect sense. He would say that.
Yeah.
But there are many other ascetic practices. Catholicism is just the obvious one, but there are many others that don't lead to that grumpiness and harebrainedness.
Right.
I like that, by the way. Grumpy, harebrained. I think I'm going to try to use that as often as I can.
Gloomy, harebrained enthusiast.
That's it. Gloomy hair. He said gloomy, harebrained enthusiasm. Yes, that's right.
Well, and that's why I say it's a straw man, because when you look at, again, you take out the desert monk extreme, who I still say is performing an objective good because he's contemplating the unknown. Mm-hmm. And from our perspective, there is rarely a higher good than that coming from the intellectual.
Yeah. The Cistercian experience is very similar to that, and that's local to us. The Gethsemane monks are Cistercians. They are a contemplative order. That's what they do. They pray consistently. Yeah. They also work.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not a teaching order. They're a contemplative order. So that is exactly the value they bring. That's something that Hume is not considering, I don't think.
Well, he's also knocking what is essentially the practice of theologians, which again is part and parcel of what we are and do.
And that's kind of, but that is him. Yeah, he does have issues with that.
But I mean, his whole philosophy is about experience.
Correct.
And we'll talk about this more in the next episode.
Objective experience.
Yes, I mean he's talking about
of
the human experience,
yes,
of the senses,
yes.
your perceptions, and being a sensualist.
There's nothing that
Right. I mean,
there's no hardware that comes. No OS embedded in you when you're born. It's
he's not being a hedonist here.
That's what he says.
Yeah, I was gonna say because for us that would not be true.
Right.
No, but that's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah, he's not being a hedonist here, but he's saying to be alive, you need to have these experiences around other people,
and we would agree with that.
And be involved with other people. So this pulling yourself out of society, this mortification and self-denial and all this isn't doing anything for you.
Well, and again,
be out there, be experiencing things. That's the way you're going to be more alive.
He's not necessarily even seeing the potential purpose behind that.
Right, and because when he says mortification, he's probably talking about the middle-aged monk who's taking the cat o' nine tails and just flagellating himself.
Right, and again, that's going to be much more what he's going to be familiar with from his. He's a book guy,
right? But that's not a reality thing. But at the time he's talking about this, that's not really a thing anymore.
Well, but he would have been closer to it than someone
what is
now.
This? What you're right, sure. But
he's
what
a
is
1770s.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this. So yeah, yes, he would have been that. He would have been closer to that, and a lot of the things he talks about probably would have been more prevalent.
Yeah.
In his society, especially the Calvinistic background in the 1750s in Scotland. So I agree with that, but I still think it's a straw man because even then,
I think you're right.
People from certainly our faith tradition and most others.
Yes. He's positing an extreme and then knocking down the extreme.
Right.
When the extreme isn't really out there much.
Right. It's so small of an example that it's really. Now you might say, well, what about St. Augustine? He'd be a great example of this. But who actually rejected everything that Hume is positing as the good.
So he's not talking about skipping meat on Friday here.
Right. To me, that's not what he's saying. But skipping meat on Friday is a form of mortification, a form of self-sacrifice.
Yes.
Yeah. And the reason for that is not just it's multifold. Part of that is to help us understand and unite to the sufferings of Christ on the cross, which we can never fully do, but it's our way of participating in that. But it's also to help us hopefully condition ourselves to be free of those desires that do not matter. Sure, meat is a great thing.
Yes.
But it shouldn't be the be-all, end-all. Sex should not be the be-all, end-all. Money should not be the be-all, end-all. Alcohol well, bourbon. We'll skip that.
Yeah.
Skip it.
But it's to keep us. This is, I think, a better way to put it. It's to keep us from turning in on ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, that's
you
the point.
You see these virtues as a way of building character
Yes.
that he did not see.
And when you do that, it opens you up for interaction with others because you're not focused on you
Yeah.
and what's good for you alone. And that's why I think he misses the mark.
Interesting.
Yeah, a vigilant sensualism inevitably leads to self-centered and potentially narcissism.
I love.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
I think
That
down
would
that
be a
road
caution.
Yes.
is narcissism. He wouldn't see that because he'd say, well, you're around all these other people. What I'm wanting you to be is around all these other people.
But that's what a narcissist will do.
Yeah.
It's not a narcissist is not going to be alone. He's going to want to be around other
He
people
wants-
so they can compliment him and,
Right.
and do things
That
for him.
reflected glory is the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's a great point there, Francis.
That's
Are we ready to turn it over to Francis for
yes.
this quote?
Well, I know. Are we?
I think so. I think
okay,
we get
because
down
it's your quote. I
No,
think
we did 20 minutes on it, so it's
Yeah,
pretty
okay, yeah,
excellent. Let's
yeah.
rock and roll
Well,
with
yeah.
Francis here.
Yeah, because we
That's
still
right.
got to get a bourbon break in after that, and then I've
That's
got to
right.
figure out what the hell I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm going to go completely different, of course. And this kind of goes back to that sensualism that Hume was famous for, that sense experience. This
Okay.
kind of talks into that. And I like this quotation in many respects because it really does. It speaks a truth, which I think we'll all agree on. But I do believe it also puts into it a little bit of a... Well, I'll just give it to you. It's very brief.
Okay. Hit us.
Beauty in things exists in the mind which contemplates them. And
I saw that quote, yes.
Yes.
Beauty in things exists in the mind which contemplates them. Very brief. You could say... I don't want to go so far as to say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's similar.
Yes, I mean
that's sort of
probably
that.
where that comes from.
This
yes.
does not have that spin of relativism to it. This recognizes that beauty has to be in itself. The concept of beauty is ultimately something that comes from within a person, a
Yeah,
human.
it's very personalized. What you find beautiful has to, in some manner or another, ring your bells.
Yes, but I think it's deeper than that.
But it's right because your what's appealing is then based on experiences.
That's Hume, very much so. But, and here's it is not an individual experience here.
Repeat your quote, please, if you would.
Yeah. Make sure I get it right. Beauty in things exists in the mind which contemplates them. In other words, the concept of beauty is an internal function for us. That's how I read this. That's how I hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it is common, because we all have a common understanding of beauty that is it's not complete, but the Sistine Chapel is inarguably beautiful. I would think.
But again, not universally.
Perhaps, and I'm willing to.
So yeah, I would say that for the most part, there are many. Mostly, I would call that a true statement, but I don't think that's always going to be true because a Muslim would go and look at that and say, "Oh my God, this is a travesty. You are depicting God," and that's a big no-no.
Yeah.
So I mean, that'd be a great example of how, arguably, the Sistine Chapel is not beautiful because of that. But to us, it would be simply because of for many reasons. But
But there's a truth in that too. That's very, I'll pronounce this correctly, Humean.
Oh, nice.
Okay,
Nice one.
In that again, he would say that's perfectly legitimate.
Yes.
Because that is the Muslim's experience and perspective.
Yeah,
Right. And that's
perspective
why I brought that up because I think he was going in a way that Hume would not agree with. Is
Right. That beauty is not absolute.
Right. But I
But it
read
is
his
common,
quote.
though. It is common.
Well, the idea of beauty is common.
yes. If we're, and that's what
for
he's talking
those
about here.
for those with common experiences are going to find similar
things.
notions of beauty, but for those with differentiating experiences
or core values.
or yes, and to Hume, your values would be built around your experiences,
Yes.
what you've sensed. Then for those would not have the same core concepts of beauty, and for Robert the artist here, I think of somebody like, say, Francis Bacon, kind of the post-impressionist era of art. You look at this and it's striking and sometimes even frightening, but there are people who find it beautiful,
Right.
and it's still considered art. That famous.
My example of that is Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
I don't
he's
know
the
much
guy
about
that
art,
I
but
have
I
a
know
hard
what
time-
I know what I like, and it's this isn't it. But there are smart people who say, yes, this is beautiful. But when you look at a Francis Bacon painting or a Jackson Pollock, it's like, there's nothing here.
Right.
There's nothing uplifting. There's nothing glorifying here.
And oddly enough, I think Hume would look at those and think, that's crap.
That's crap.
Because he would not be able to...
Yeah.
Because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
There's
the
nothing
notion
there.
of art being uplifting and glorifying, though, is a Western one.
It is.
It is a Western Christian tradition.
Yeah, and
It
you
probably is
subscribe
not
to that,
just
yes.
Western Christian, because I think that's probably... Similar notions to that will probably be found in almost all cultures that have artistic expression beyond a utilitarian use of it.
Right.
Because it's very rare to find just a utilitarian expression of art.
Yeah.
Because
But that would be... the Muslim
Would be
concept of
close.
art is pretty close because,
Yes.
I mean, it's sword arches and
right.
onion domes and things like that
Right.
are very utilitarian. But I think you're right. In an Eastern perception, too, there would be...
Yeah.
Art should be uplifting, and there's some overlap in the concept of beauty between East and
Right,
West.
right,
And
Well, there's a lot of commonality in cultures there that we fail to recognize often,
yeah.
which is a shame.
Yeah, that even Hindu culture, a lot of the iconography is still similar to Western.
Yes.
I used iconography like Trevor Slattery.
Very
You
good.
did.
Yes,
Very
sir.
good. Yes.
Very good.
I noted the use of it, but I wanted to hear where you were going with it.
That's
Yes.
very good, sir. Yes.
So what I find interesting about your quote and the way the discussion has gone is I hear the quote and what I hear is this. So beauty exists. I don't know if it was only or if it just exists in the mind of he who contemplates it or something like that.
Right.
So what that says to me is a couple of things. One is that beauty is intangible.
Certainly, I think
You
we have to go
you
there.
can't pick it up.
It is a concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we even
Concept.
say that about other people. I mean, there's outward beauty and then there's inner beauty, and certainly you could be attracted to someone who, by most standards, would be physically unattractive.
Right.
But you're attracted to that person because of character or intellect or whatever.
Right.
I mean,
Or because they're funny. You know?
right. I mean, would I rather speak to Mayim Bialik or Paris Hilton? Paris Hilton's objectively a very attractive woman. But from all descriptions,
I'd rather...
she's a goofball.
Yeah.
Mayim Bialik's a genuine neuroscientist who,
Is
by
a
most
genius.
standards of beauty, is not a super attractive woman, but would certainly be a hell of a lot more interesting to talk to.
Right. So this whole idea that, to me, he's acknowledging that beauty is intangible, and also acknowledging that it can only, I don't want to say exist, because I think that's not true, because for us, beauty is an objective reality. Truth and beauty are linked, and because we also believe in objective truth, there's objective beauty. Which I'm sure he would disagree with.
Right, I mean, then Hume would be disconnecting those concepts
Right,
completely.
and I get that.
Right,
That's
Francis?
correct.
I think
That's
so.
right, yeah.
And I get that. But even so, truth and beauty are both intangible. So in many ways, you can't separate them.
And we've hammered on the concept of truth many times.
We have, yes.
Whether an absolutist notion of truth or a Nietzschean truth flows from power. Those kind of concepts.
But ultimately, you're right. It is, and this is very Platonic in its approach. Is back to the forms. There's no such thing as there's only examples of beauty. There is not beauty itself. There is no such thing. There are examples of truth, but there is no such thing as truth itself, other than intellectually, conceptually.
Philosophically, I would agree. The only place where I would disagree with that is when we start talking theologically for us, because truth and beauty being very nearly equivalent, we're talking something that is godlike.
That's correct.
So,
but those concepts then have to be rooted in faith.
Yes, or natural reason. We would also argue, but that's an entirely other argument.
Oh, a natural reason. Yes, Hume would kick that in the ass.
Yeah, well, he would try. He would try.
He's definitely he's a very, I don't want to say anti-reason, but in many respects, he says it's fallacy. The whole concept of reason is fallacy.
Reason is a fallacy,
which is odd because much of what he says is the quotes that I'm seeing is presented as reason, as a reasonable statement, as a reasoned out conjecture.
Yeah, he would use the word custom. That's basically how we talk. That's why he.
Because a good philosopher always has an answer for something like that.
Yeah, so we'll get into all that in the next episode too. So
that's, to me, that was an interesting quote, because I saw that and I thought, that's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there.
That's why I picked it. Yeah, because I knew that it's just the concept of beauty, and you could have said truth. He could have.
Yes,
but
I think truth is harder to agree with there.
Yeah,
beauty, absolutely, I would agree, because it is intangible. And to a large degree, it is in the eye of the beholder, but I think it's less in the eye of the beholder as it is. This is only some people, and probably everybody, can only perceive a small portion of what is beauty at a time.
Absolutely.
Just like we cannot conceive the totality of truth, we cannot conceive and contemplate the totality of what is beauty.
Absolutely, because beauty is beyond simple quantification.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it is not quantifiable.
It's not quantifiable.
Yes.
It's interesting. He says beauty in things in the quote here, not beauty as a concept. He does say beauty in things. So he is speaking of examples. Right,
and that's why I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder flows from this. But even that, I don't think it's true, because beauty in things, I think, still can work with my idea of we're only able to contemplate a portion of beauty. Because
our own finite nature, even no matter how vast it might be, it pales in comparison infinitesimally.
Yeah.
I was trying to impress you with that, but I kind of stumbled.
No, I think you did fine. Fine with it.
Fits compared to the enormity of beauty itself.
To use a practical example that Martin did, so Mayim Bialik, she is not the standard of Hollywood beauty. Although when she was younger, before she got to, because she's now middle-aged.
I think Mayim Bialik is beautiful.
I do too, but
totally
most people though would look at her and say, well, she's kind of plain. She dresses kind of frumpy when you see her on Jeopardy. Mm-hmm. And certainly, it's like, well, she's just dressing as Amy. Maybe that's how she actually dresses. I don't know. But, Amy did not wear makeup on the show, so, her primary visual for most people is a relatively plain woman. But, she does the whole makeup. Makeup covers a lot of things, and I'm not saying women have to wear makeup to be beautiful. But she can even, though, have a bit of that glamour kind of beauty. But somebody who is purely into the aesthetics will look and say, she does nothing for me. I think she's ugly, which I think would be a very much a disservice to her. Whereas somebody else might say, oh my God, she is brilliant.
Well,
and admire
objectively so,
the beauty of that. Because there is beauty in intellect. There's beauty, and that's where I think truth and beauty are related.
Beauty and intellect. Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
I think what you've got, what you have here is
certainly. I agree. I find her outstanding, and I'm thrilled that she got a permanent job on Jeopardy, and I love her.
Yep, she's great. And she is good at being an actress. I mean, the Blossom thing, that's when she's a teenager. You say, well, cute teen, blah, blah, blah. But she was great as Amy. And actually, that show, Call Me Kat, which is set here in Louisville,
Yes.
it's not necessarily stupendously funny. It's certainly not Big Bang Theory funny. But it's kind of funny. It's not knee-slapping kind of thing. I like the fact that she breaks the fourth wall occasionally. Because she made a joke about hosting Jeopardy in one episode. I haven't watched a whole lot of it, but I've seen them just because it's set here.
Yeah.
I want to see how they treat that. So she's good at that craft too, which to me is a form of beauty.
Yeah. I think I cut you off, Francis. I think you were saying something.
I was going to say it's time for a bourbon break.
Oh, excellent.
Hey, that's my job.
I was just
Captain.
noting it. Yes, exactly.
But you know what? It is time for a bourbon break.
I thought you might appreciate that. Yes.
So
Is your glass empty? Can I get you
no, I
something?
still have a little bit of bourbon here. This is the Granddad 114.
Yeah, Old Granddad 114.
So we talked about this last episode, and I am finding that the peppery flavor that I noted before has become stronger to me. It's almost too overpowering.
I was going to say that's a bad thing. I'm sensing
Yes. So, as Martin said, well, maybe some ice to chill it back or to dilute.
Yeah, another couple
might
of
help
ice
with
cubes
that.
would have evened it out.
Yeah.
And not made it so strong at the finish.
Yeah. So, it's almost like the melting of the ice, a very slow progression, just built up that peppery, because it wasn't there at the beginning, like I am finding it now. It's still good, but at this particular stage of its flavor, I wouldn't call this my go-to, or a go-to, just because it's very peppery to me, very spicy. Still good.
Francis, what about you, man? I think you're still working
I'm still working on the same thing. With ice in it, it damps it down a little bit. It's still in the mouth.
Yeah. Oh yes.
It's very much there. 114 proof. That's high. That gives me a headache. I can't do them high proof things. It just I could sit here and drink this 80 proof stuff like it's Kool-Aid and all afternoon and I'm cool. But you start throwing out 100, 110, 114. Yeah,
you have to slow down on that.
I don't mean in a drunken way. I mean it's actual. I have a sinus headache, which I hate sinus headaches. That sort of thing. That's what this is. I don't know why that is, but the higher proofs do that to me. So next, I'll dampen it down a little bit for the next go round.
I'll pour you some wild turkey or something that's a little lower proof for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's just kind of where I like to live. It just makes the most sense. It's not harsh. The old Granddad 114. It's got a bite, but a mild, smooth bite.
But it is one we would recommend.
Oh, of course.
Listeners, give that a try.
Yeah, there's very few that we've said don't do this one on. I think Jefferson.
That one Jefferson that you had,
and you have commented on which one's the one that you said tastes like medicine to you.
The Buffalo Trace tastes like toothpaste and medicine to me. I don't care for it. Bjorn, again, this is the downside of having an offspring who works at a liquor store. Bjorn is exploring bourbon himself.
Well, he's also just turned of age, last many months.
So he likes the Buffalo Trace. He did not find it toothpastey. I have just poured. I finished my old Granddad. I put considerably more ice than the other fellas did, so mine's a little more watered down.
I was going to say that may make a big difference.
Yeah. So I finished my 114, and I have poured a small dose of the Green River that I have on the shelf. Again, because of Bjorn, my collection is fairly expensive, almost to Sage of Roberts.
I noticed that it had grown considerably. I was quite surprised. Because usually you've got one or two bottles that were desperately trying to finish off.
Yes, I mean,
I might buy another one until they're gone.
Yeah, I might have as many as 4 bottles or something, but now I've got 7. But the Green River is the one that I noted had some licorice flavor to it, and I'm enjoying it. I really like it. So it's another recommend for me. So I think that concludes Bourbon Break. You ready, Robert?
Sort of, maybe. I don't know. There is so much.
Hume was prolific.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. Very much so. And wise. I mean, if you read through, just do a quick Google search of David Hume quotes, and you're going to come up with lots of really good stuff.
And his career was quite lengthy. I mean, he lived to be 65, was it? Which doesn't seem like a long time to us, but
that's
he began, I quote, college education at like age 14. So, I mean, he's writing...
College education back
Right.
then was, not what we're talking about today, though.
Yeah, but, I mean, he was essentially admitted to, what was it, Francis, was it Oxford or someplace?
Yes,
And-
most
and-
likely, yeah. Born
So,
in
I mean, you're
Edinburgh.
talking about someone who wrote for 35 to 40 years
Right.
as a published author for quite some time. So there's a ton of material here.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to go with is it's a very short one, and talks about the nature of truth. So the reason I'm picking this particular one is it's going to be a very roundabout way to tie these together, because you guys have given me a real challenge here. Although honestly, the thing about beauty existing in the mind of the one who contemplates it is very much almost a companion statement to your. So let's, as I like to do, let's reread the quotes.
I thought you would want that.
Yes.
So, celibacy, fasting, penance, mortification, self-denial, humility, silence, solitude, and the whole train of monkish virtues stupefy the understanding and harden the heart, obscure the fancy and sour the temper. A gloomy, harebrained enthusiast, after his death, may have a place in the calendar, but will scarcely ever be admitted, when alive, into intimacy and society, except by those who are as delirious and dismal as himself.
Of course, my first thought to that real quick is the Catholic response is we are to be in the world, but not of the world. So,
Yeah. That's
anyways.
mine is much shorter, as we remember. Beauty in things exists in the mind, which contemplates them.
Yes. So, the thing I'd like to point out here, which I didn't when we were talking about this before. So, Martin's statement is a great example of the truth of Francis's statement.
Right, exactly. Yes, that there is beauty in the aesthetic virtues
Yes.
that he doesn't see.
Right, because his mind cannot contemplate those. Whether you want to talk about as contemplate them or cannot conceive them.
Because Hume did not like to push himself away from the table.
Right.
Oh, well, yeah, that's...
And yeah, well, that's a hard thing to do. Granted,
Yeah.
we're
That's
all
one reason-
sensualists in a way.
He was well liked in his time. You would think with his atheistic tendencies, he would have become anathema, particularly in this era of religious upheaval.
Well,
And-
but when you're also the guy who's pushing, here, have another drink, have another turkey leg, you're going to be more liked than not.
Well, that's kind of it. That's one of the...
Which is kind of his point.
Yeah, right. And he did have a social circle that he enjoyed,
Yeah.
and who reciprocated that enjoyment and helped his career.
Yeah, and I wonder what he would think, because if you tried to take that expression, if he were to live today, what he would say, because I find it hard to believe he would start out with that description of the monkish attitudes and all that
Yeah.
in the same way, because that is not. Could you get me one of those, please?
Yes,
Francis was getting up to get a Little Debbie.
Little Debbie has not made an appearance on an episode in a while.
No, we've missed Debbie.
We're all
She's
eating
been-
her up right now because
Yeah.
we've got plenty of them here.
But I wonder if it maybe my dislike of that, or thinking of that as being a straw man, is that in this day and age it is a straw man.
Yeah.
In that age, maybe it wasn't a straw
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So I will give him that.
All right,
So-
let's have your quote.
So my quote is this, and I think Snakes and Otters itself proves this quote.
Oh, I think I know which one you've picked, because I think I love this one.
The truth springs from arguments amongst friends.
A perfect quotation,
Yes, I thought so much of using that one. I said, no, I gotta keep looking.
And obviously,
I love it though.
Yeah, obviously that's what this entire show is about. Although I would not call them arguments in the sense that we think about it today.
No,
Because
right.
in his day, arguments could have just meant a discussion like we are having now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like an apology is not saying I'm sorry. It's an argument for something.
Right.
Yes,
So-
yes.
For him,
Yes.
it was the discussion. It was the delving
Yes.
deep into the ideas.
Yeah, the Algonquin Round Table, the Salon, the Paris Salon,
Yes.
the Hemingway's table in Paris, that kind of thing. Of
the inklings for Tolkien.
Yeah, sitting around and talking about things and having a glass of wine and, you're full of it.
Right. It's like, well, you can't just say that, you asshole. You got to tell me why I'm full of it.
Yes, it's sharpen the argument.
Right. And that's the reason I chose, not just, to blow smoke up our own rear ends, because we do that often enough anyways. I don't need a specific case for that. But it kind of your two quotes are exactly this.
Yeah.
This is probably the most concrete connection between our quotes in that sense.
Yes, I agree.
If not philosophically, in the sense that I usually can say, well, the meaning is tied together, so much as really all of this is this. All of our discussion is this search for truth.
Yeah.
Whether it's
beauty.
Or beauty, because to us, there is not necessarily an exact one-to-one in the humanitarian sense or human sense, but there's a strong correlation, not just causation.
Absolutely, yes.
Causation and correlation. So that search for truth, because we are finite creatures, has to be done this way. Because there's very rarely a case where God comes down and says, this is it. And even then, a generation, or even within that same generation, 10 minutes later, those same people are worshiping a golden calf.
Yeah, very well put. Very well put. That's right.
Exactly. I'm so glad you went there. I knew you. I said, I knew it. Do it. Do the Moses.
Even when he's
just come down from the mountain and told you about the burning bush and has these 10 commandments. You're still melting gold and making it into a calf.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you people?
Technically, that's what was going on while he was up there. But he says, look, God says this. I was like, when I come back down from this mountain, I got to have the rules straight from God. So you think these people, oh yeah, this is great. We're going to prepare. We're going to be ready for it. No, they're having an orgy around a golden statue of a calf. It's like, yeah, that is not. So, and these are believers. These are believers.
Yeah, so they say.
So they said. So, yeah, because we are finite, because we make mistakes, because we only can contemplate an aspect of what is beauty, and because we can only conceive of certain things, we can only understand certain things. Hume couldn't understand the good in contemplating other things in self-denial, whereas we can't see the good in total hedonism. I mean, beyond the passing. When I say good, I mean like capital G good. Right. That eternal question kind of good. Mm-hmm. That Snakes and Otters is about.
Good for you.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
And so, to me, there's been 2 or 3 quotes that we've come up with throughout the years that we've been doing this. And this is another one of those that could be the slogan for Snakes and Otters, besides an eternal discussion, or pointless discussion of eternal truth. It's the same damn thing.
Yes, it is.
It's the same damn thing.
Yeah.
And
how you arrive at truth is an argument among friends.
Yeah.
That's right.
And again, not argument as in contention.
You can't get there any other way.
Right. It's like how science is done, although it's usually a lot more combative.
Yeah, but there's a concept underlying that of goodwill.
Yes.
That you're, here we go again, talking about our current moment. If you're not willing to allow for some goodwill, then you're not going to convince anyone.
Exactly.
Your argument's pointless. You're just screaming at each other.
Yep. Your argument could be the most beautiful, eloquent thing ever. But if you're not going to allow goodwill on the part of the other person, it's farting in the wind.
Yeah, and it's very much where we are of, if you don't agree with someone, then just automatically go, well, you're a fascist. You're grumble, 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 you're a fascist. That's unhelpful. Yep. That's unhelpful. again, in the wake of the Mississippi decision, was a lot of, F this and F that. Well, that's unhelpful. If you want to make an argument for your position, then you have to extend some goodwill to the other side and make an argument.
Ultimately,
lay out a reason.
You're supposed to be about conversion. Well, nobody's converted by your yelling at them.
Exactly.
Absolutely nobody.
Exactly.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that we have today because we have abandoned this as a culture. Because we no longer have we no longer have a populace that understands what words mean.
Yeah.
Well, they've been conditioned to think otherwise sometimes.
Right. And my specific example is because I already mentioned it, is the word argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be understood that it does not mean to yell and scream. We talk about, my parents had an argument last night. Well, immediately think they were yelling and screaming at each other. Or at least in my family, that's what it meant. But in general, we think there's anger involved. That's not what argument should mean.
No. It could mean that.
In the public square,
it should not always mean that.
Especially in the public square. It's not what it should mean.
That's right.
So, because we have lost what should be a fuller meaning of the word, the contention we currently see as a result of that. Because when we make an argument, that automatically means we're fighting. Mm-hmm. That's part of the problem. Because like you said, it means there's no goodwill. You cannot think the other person is arguing in good faith. Whether you think their argument is bullshit or not. Because I can have a discussion with somebody and think their argument is total BS. But I can still discuss it with them. But when you
extend a little grace,
exactly,
hear them out, because as Francis likes to note, if you understand their argument, it sharpens the blade of your own argument.
Well, hopefully so.
And again, in the argument of, or in the definition of argument, meaning I'm constructing a case to attempt to persuade you. Right. And we're not just yelling the F word at each other.
Well, the intention also is, and this is, I think, this is part of God, I think, and its antithesis is not, is that we're attempting to bring everyone together into what we believe is a good place for all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very altruistic. It's supposed to be that.
Yeah.
But, for whatever reason, plurality is not seen as a good in and of itself any longer. That's a Lockean theme, because he was all about that.
Yeah.
And that's a Jeffersonian theme too, is we recognize nobody's going to ever agree. We just need enough people to agree that we're getting along. We just need enough people to get along. That's no longer, that's a problem. That's the enemy in many respects.
Yeah.
Public discourse is getting along. That should be the goal. But it never is. It's about destroying the other side.
Right, because we've gotten to the point where, and this is probably true for, again, I've said it before, I know you guys, for me this is very un-me. Because for the most part, I'm a generally positive person. I'm a generally positive outlook on life.
Absolutely.
But the logical conclusion I see from society today is that we cannot come back from where we are without a major upheaval of some kind. Because we are at the point where we have to win. Nobody likes to lose. But that expression implies, well, yeah, it could happen. And we'll have to deal with it.
Well, they recognize there's always another battle down the road.
Right.
Used to. Now,
it's we have to win at all costs. Because losing seems to be, that means death. Mm-hmm. Like, well, to me, that's a stupid argument.
Very much so.
Right.
Incredibly stupid.
Everything is always for all the marbles.
Yeah.
And no, that's not the case.
Because we can't construct an argument that says, okay, we can revisit this. You're right. Everything seems to be...
Why can't we find a solution?
It's all life or death.
Yeah. Why can't we find a solution where everybody wins?
Every issue is life or death right now, this minute, and we must win at all costs.
Well, yeah, because winning is an absolute. And it used to be that To win was, I don't get everything I want, but I got enough. You didn't get everything you wanted, but you got enough. That's a win-win. That's no longer the issue. Now it's 100 and 0.
Yes.
Is the only acceptable solution versus 50 to 50
and
or 40 to 60 or whatever that is.
The inability of everyone outside their core group, and I would posit that outside of rare examples like us, because yes, I will pat myself on the back along with you guys in this, is that it is rare that a group of people can sit down and actually discuss either meaning of life stuff, which is where we tend to go a lot.
That's right. Yeah.
It's part of the slogan, pointless discussion of eternal questions. Or even just sit down and talk about possible solutions to problems. And we're all relatively similar. We're not exactly alike. We all have our differences that make us all better.
Yeah.
Which I think is the ideal. That's why I think this group is phenomenal. But as a whole, once you bring in somebody, and try in society, once you bring in somebody that has a differing opinion on anything, it's disruptive. It is no longer additive. It is subtractive. And people who can't sit around and figure out the truth by arguing amongst friends has doomed society.
Yeah.
I know that's a very negative approach to things, and but I honestly have a hard time seeing how we step back from the precipice that we are at. And ultimately, what this is, the inability to discover truth by arguing amongst friends, at the core, is inherently not respecting the inherent dignity of the human person.
Of course.
You know,
absolutely.
that's what it goes back
We always
to.
go back to that.
I know that's where I can tie anything into that, but honestly, to me, that's what it is.
That's right.
Because when you cannot admit the goodwill of others.
That's right. Well, you dehumanize them.
It's a sociopathic way of looking at life.
Yes, very true.
It is. And again, we decry the whole notion of no one wants to make a reasoned argument anymore.
Yeah.
It's all just call everybody a fascist and somehow that invalidates the position. It's like, but win me over.
Right.
Why will you not even try to win me over?
I wish I could remember the name of the internet term was. It's sooner or later the argument ends when somebody invokes the Nazism.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And
That's no longer true.
Yeah, that's right. Sooner or later, it used to be that took 8-10 steps to get there, and that's when everybody says, "Okay, we're out of here," because there's no more discussion anymore.
Right.
That's whereas just 3 or 4 years ago, that was step 8 or 9 or 10 in the argument. Now it's
That's
2
step 1.
It's 2 and
Step
3.
one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's immediate. You're a fascist. Well, you're not winning me over. If you want to win, you have to convert.
That's right, and
We
that
need a
requires
discussion.
And just repeating your side's position over and over isn't going to do it.
well, and that because
And everybody does this. This is not a leftist thing or a right thing.
no, not at all.
Or even a centrist thing. Even the centrists are bad at this. They're probably less bad because, although honestly, I think they piss off everybody else because they're not right enough or they're not left enough. So both sides are.
Well, in a polarized society, you're right. That's correct, which is what we're living in.
Yeah.
What you'll find, though, usually, is that nobody wants anybody else to have anything. There's a very self-centeredness to this, and I think that's what's dooming us in many ways. I want to, before I lose this, and I know we're getting close to time here to wrap it up, but I want to make mention of a book that I was recommended to me 2 weeks ago that you guys need to read. I've already gotten it from by David French is the name of the author.
I know. I've heard of him. I'm not
Yes,
read him.
he is an amazing talent, and his. And while I'm sitting here talking through this, I'm going to pull up the actual name of the book so I can give it to you. But he's talking about what it would take for there to be a secession, a modern day breaking apart of the United States, and he makes a very cogent argument. And all that we've just been talking about is the reason why. He says we can no longer abide. We are so polarized, and it is geographic now. It's become that. Red versus blue. Divided We Fall is the name of the book. America's Secession Threat and How to Restore Our Nation. I highly recommend this book. The 3 scenarios he gives for actual secession, to me, he builds in certain almost impossibilities which does give me hope, because I realized in order for this to really happen, you got to have some extreme things happening, which he puts in the scenarios. But ultimately, that might be 50, 60 years in the future. Not impossible. But it's very, very worth discussing the fact that we cannot agree on so many things. And maybe because we are no longer willing to get along, this might be the inevitable result. And he goes into the details of there's no reason to stay together, unlike there was at the Civil War, where we had a vested interest in staying unified.
But well, from a secessionist standpoint, did we?
That's correct. That's the argument.
Well, even from a unionist side, other than the fact that we think we are stronger together, all of the flaws of the slave states aside, why did we have to stay together?
Well, and it eventually became its own thing. It took on a life of its own.
Right.
And a lot of that is Lincoln. No question that was what he did.
Yeah.
French's argument is we don't.
And don't get me wrong. I'm glad we did not break apart.
Correct. We are better for it. I don't know that we could have taken on Nazi Germany.
No, we couldn't.
Or to the extent that we did. So there's all that. But French's argument is more or less like we probably won't in the long term. There will be 3 countries where there are now 1.
Oh, 3. Interesting.
Yeah, because geographically speaking, you have the West Coast, you have the Northeast, and the rest. That's where he sees this going for various reasons. And
Chicago's going to be screwed because they're in the middle of the red.
Well, and that's part of the problem.
And they're extremely blue.
Again, he has 3 different scenarios. One of which is California seceding, and then the rest of it, and that's where that ends. Another one is Texas seceding if things go differently the other way. And that again,
Texas, I think, is one of those states that actually has a case for secession, being they were an independent country prior to joining.
Right. So it's a fascinating study. Like I say, I think he's a prophet. I don't know that in our lifetime, in our mid-50s, that we'll see this happen, but I bet our grandchildren will. They will eventually realize, we're just too different.
Well, if there's one of those societal catastrophes that I've talked about as a trigger, yes.
Ultimately, there is some of that in there.
Whether it be a natural disaster, a worse depression than we saw in the 30s, or military issue, whether like an EMP or whatever,
right.
Or solar flare knocks out the grid, whatever, something that causes mass catastrophic events.
The scenarios he gives are all of our own making,
right?
Which is very interesting. It doesn't have any of those type things in it. It's more about California enacts an extreme gun law and begins confiscation, and from there they are not willing to back away from that. The Supreme Court says you can't do that. They say, "Watch me," and things. It builds in the inability to compromise as the Shakespearean flaw.
So that would be an interesting case to see what would happen, because theoretically at that point,
it's probably the
feds could send in troops.
Well, that's exactly what happens in his scenario. And of course, eventually it gets to the point where in that case, a Republican president says, well, if they go, I win every election forever. So,
there's a lot of truth to that.
So there's a vested interest here that's fascinating. It's a fascinating thought study. I encourage you to read it, readers. If you haven't got a chance, again, David French, look it up. Divided We Fall.
I think I've heard of this book, but I've not.
It's 2 years old.
I've not read any details about it like this.
Which
before.
It's actually kind of fascinating.
And you've read this?
Yes, I just finished it. It was written in 2020, and it was a year before the January 6th issues, which is very interesting because some of the scenarios he talks about are very prophetic of that. Again, I highly recommend it.
Interesting.
Well,
boys, I think we have pummeled that expired equine pretty well.
We have.
Yeah.
Good show. Again, I love these shows. This is my bread and butter. It really is. I love it.
Perfect.
So, Francis.
Well, part 2, as what we're doing these days is we've talked about David Hume's quotations and explored those. We're going to talk about the man and how, in many respects, he is the linchpin guy. Now, you can make that argument about all of them in many ways, but this is the one that really decides, let's kick this football hard, and he scores some serious touchdowns and changes the world.
Look at Francis going all sports.
I mean, he mangled it, but he did go sportsy.
Well, he kept it in the same sport.
Yeah.
It's not like he said,
Well, he kicked the football to a touchdown.
Oh, well, yes,
Okay.
that's true, yes.
Well,
Yeah.
all right, field goal. Yes, I understand. Okay, that's right.
And it was returned for a touchdown.
Returned for a touchdown.
Okay, let's just skip a bit, brother. Join us next time, folks, where we talk about David Hume and his philosophy.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week, same snake time, same otter channel.